wallow in obsession, treating others as possession.
Hey, how's everybody doing? This is Michael coming to you from ProWestRecording.com, and I want to go over some vocal techniques today. What you were just listening to, that's Johnny Oskam. He's a 22-year-old blues artist coming up out of Southern California. I had the privilege of producing, recording, mixing his whole debut album, which just came out last week. It's called Soul Search. You can find it on iTunes or at his website, johnnyoskam.com. I'll go ahead and put the links below. We're both really proud of it. He's a great talent, and I had a lot of fun mixing it. I want to show you some vocal techniques that I did on this particular song. This is Human Genocide, and it will require, a knowledge of signal routing and all that, but I assume you'll be able to grasp what I'm throwing at you here. The first thing I want to show you is how to do effect ducking. If you've heard the term ducking before, you've probably heard it in relation to having, say, like a bass line duck underneath a kick drum, or pumping, right? If you have like synths ducking as a result of a kick drum in electronic dance type music. In this case, we're going to be using the same idea, the same signal routing idea, but instead of the other things, we're going to be using it for controlling the amount of wet effect, so delay, reverb, all that I have going on my vocal track. So all my vocal stuff right here is in purple and green, and what I'm going to show you is this. So here's the lead vocal that we just heard straight up, and then let me get rid of my effects. And the way that I have this routed is through this subgroup of dynamics processing and EQ. The reason it's subbed together is because this is obviously the lead part, and then I have some doubles, I have an octave, and I have some harmonies going on. And I wanted them to have similar dynamics processing. So these are all being routed to this subgroup here. So let's listen to it dry.
People wallow in obsession. People wallow in obsession.
That sounds great. I really was able to dial in some good compression. I love the LA2A by Waves. It sounds great.
People wallow in obsession.
It's pretty moderate. I have this EQ notching out a frequency I didn't like, and then I have some de-essing going on. So dry, it sounds really, really, really cool. So in the traditional sense of how to then set up an effects channel, a lot of people, they will just drop, their reverb and their delay plugins onto the actual track. And although you can do it that way, I don't necessarily recommend it, because if you want to think old school, like the way the analog consoles are set up, is you had to send to an outboard, let's say reverb unit, and then the return would come back into the board. And so that's the way I route things inside of Pro Tools, because in essence, that's what your DAW is a digital console. So split off of the Vox sub is my Vox Effects send, which I have set to nominal, post fader, and that is being routed into this channel here, which I've renamed Vox Effects. And so on here I have some EQ, which I like to have it there, I guess, but I didn't end up using it. I have my H delay, which is a great delay unit by Waves as well. I have Deverb, which comes stock with Pro Tools, set to a small vocal plate. And then I have the stock compressor from Pro Tools, and that's doing my ducking. I like the stock compressor in Pro Tools for other things. There's better ones, so I like to use those as far as the sonic quality. If the sonic quality of the compressor is important, then I'm going to be using the better ones. But the stock works on this song because all I'm using it for is the duck. So the way that it works is this. I have a send coming off of my vocal sub, and I've renamed it. It was an available bus. I renamed it sidechain, and it's a pre-fader send. And then you come into your compressor here, which is on the end of my. You want to make sure it's the last insert on the effects chain here, and you're going to come into your side chain, your key input, and you're going to select the side chain that you created, which is the split off of here. And make sure this key is turned on. So now this compressor is looking for input from the vocal line. So here's what it would sound like if I bypass the compressor. Now, let me preface that by saying this. The whole point of this is I have a few friends who've shown me some mixes, and they're fans of delay on vocal, as am I, if it's fitting for the song. But a lot of times, and maybe you've noticed this in your own mixes too, if you have the delay going, the words that are echoing back start to get in the way of the main vocal, and it kind of just sounds like a jumbled old mess. So what this is used for then is, as the vocal is being sung, the first line, then the delays are being ducked down in volume. They're being lowered, and that's happening with that compressor. And then as soon as the person stops singing the line, the compressor lets off, and the delays and the reverb and all that good news get to come back through. So here it is with this bypassed, okay? And you're going to notice, I'm going to turn this up for dramatic effect here, but you're going to notice that the echoes and the reverb, they get in the way of what he's saying.
People wallow in obsession.
Just doesn't sound, I mean, it sounds cool, but it takes away from the main vocal. So with all of this routing that I just explained, let me turn this back on. Now, when he's actually saying people wallow, it's going to be triggering the compressor to be dropping the volume of the effects chain however much I want. So, and then however much you want is controlled by the threshold, okay? So here we go. You're going to notice now that it's dropping it.
People wallow in obsession.
A good 20 dB almost. So it sounds clear. It sounds clear when he's singing, and then as soon as he stops singing, you'll notice that the compressor lets off, and all of a sudden you get this really cool kind of swell almost of reverb into the delay.
People wallow in obsession.
And you want to toy with that. I toyed with it to get it to be the right threshold. So one downside to this, and you have to kind of make up for it, is obviously in addition to it dropping the echo, it's dropping the reverb, so it can make the line itself sound a little dry. So I've set up a separate room reverb here that is being split off of my Vox sub, and that is unaffected by this compressor because obviously it's a completely different bus. And I'll leave that on at all times so that it doesn't sound super dry and then all of a sudden wet. Like the reverb will be consistent throughout the line. So now take a listen.
People wallow in obsession.
Okay, let's listen in context.
People wallow in obsession.
Cool, right? It sounds good. It's present. The LA2A is amazing. It sounds really, really in your face and good. This song has a lot of attitude, so the next trick that I did is I added a little vocal distortion to the mix here. Again, this is a plugin that a lot of people choose to insert just straight onto the track, which you can do. But then it might be too much. I mean, obviously the distortion plugin itself has a mix feature, right? You can choose how much of it will be without distortion and how much will be with. So you can kind of do without routing. In this case, you see I have a pre-fader send to it. But I like to have a separate fader and a separate channel set up because I'd like to be able to EQ my distortion differently. I'd like to have de-essing, so some high-end compression going on differently. And so that gives me a lot more flexibility. So I really suggest you do this. So real simple, what I'm doing here is I'm taking a split off of my lead Vox, and I'm having its input be an stereo aux, which I've then distorted and processed. And then I can mix this underneath it too, in addition to the vocal effects chain, the room verb, and now I have this distortion to give it kind of an angry sound, which is cool.
People wallow in obsession.
That was much, but I would bring it down, just so it kind of
People
fits
wallow in obsession.
And then the last bit is I don't want that distortion to be completely dry, so I have another split coming off of my vocal distortion, which is running into the vocal effects chain. So the distortion you'll hear, and then you also hear a copy of it being run through the same processing that the initial signal was run through, which, now we're getting into a little bit of tricky business. If you don't know exactly how to do something like that, be careful. You could create a feedback loop and all that. But this is some processing that really sounds great. It sounds, especially in the mix with this kind of rock energy. And these are just some techniques that maybe you weren't aware of, but they definitely help your mix sound better, and they're definitely what the pros are doing out there. So let's take a listen here on the way out.
People wallow in obsession, treating others as possession. People kill for what they don't need. All it is selfish greed.
All right, guys, I hope you have a great day. Again, this was Michael from ProWestRecording.com. Check out our website, ProWestRecording.com. You can check out Johnny Oskam. His new record's out now. It's on iTunes and on his website.